So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. In my short presentation, I will try to give a quick overview of the air traffic situation in Europe, how it is managed, what is changing, and then address two possibilities for investment and opportunity for Malta. First of all, the global picture. Try to go back. Okay, we'll forget the global picture. What I wanted to show was three areas. That was a 24-hour clip, which will be available, but it shows US, Europe, and Asia. And that was 3 years ago. And since then, we have had two changes, or at least one change which has happened, and one change which is still to happen. The one change which has happened is the buildup of traffic in the Middle East, and also in Africa. And the one change which has not happened is the buildup of traffic in the Mediterranean. And the Libyan situation 2 years ago has certainly not helped. So, two slides on Eurocontrol. Eurocontrol is an organization of the safety of air navigation. It's more than 50 years old. It covers 40 states, EU and non-EU. Malta was a member of Eurocontrol in the 80s. In fact, before Spain, before Italy, before a number of bigger countries. There are too many states for it to be a coherent position in Europe. So the European Commission has a regulation which talks about the single European sky and functional airspace blocks, which rather than has 40 states now has 9 functional airspace blocks. In Europe, we have the regulator, which is the Commission and which is European Aviation Safety Agency, EASA. There is the operator. There are the FABs, or the National Air Navigation Services, who each form the FAB. And there's the network manager, which is a designation, a nomination given to Eurocontrol in order to oversee the safe, punctual flight efficiency and cost effectiveness of the network. The traffic suffered a significant stagnation or decrease in the last 5 years. Historically, it had been going up since the early 60s. We are now back. We seem to have already started a growth again, but the growth is certainly less steep. The gradient is less steep than it has been for historically. Latest forecasts from last week show that until 2020, we expect in Europe an increase in traffic of 20% in Europe, with variations across Europe, variations which happen as soon as there are political events which impact the traffic and where the aircraft will fly. And I just quote Syria, and I quote now Ukraine. So let's talk now more about investment. The Minister has just talked about research and academia. In Europe, there's a huge program, a 3 billion research program, which member states and organizations and universities are invited to participate to calls. Malta has taken a very small part in this. Less than 0.001 of the funds have flown, but it's a start. But certainly there's a big opportunity in working for the future of aviation, of air traffic management in Europe. I come to the second point that I want to make, and I will then conclude in summarizing these 2 points. The second point was the Mediterranean. On the screen you see the traffic that was last July. That's a graph for July. It's exactly the traffic on a day. And you can see that the Mediterranean and the gray parts are where there's an interface with Europe and the single European sky. It's an area which is developing. The traffic in the Middle East wants to come to Europe, wants to go to the US. That's the part that we're interested. It does not need to fly so far north in order to go to Europe and to the US. It doesn't need to go via Iraq, via Turkey. It can come via Egypt, via Libya, via Malta, if it wants to go to Europe. That's traffic, that's revenue. So, in order to come to the proposals, the first one is looking at the deployment of new systems in Europe. In order for this to be a cost-effective system in Europe, Eurocontrol and the states have agreed to have a centralized services which are given out to tender to be done on behalf of the network manager in Europe by industry. It's a new way of doing business in Europe. It is also an opportunity. It's a business opportunity. In fact, this month, calls for interest will be sent out for 14 of these services. And it is the way of making Europe more cost-effective, able to compete with other regions, because as the Minister had just said, airlines want a cost-effective operation. If it doesn't make sense for them to operate, they will not. And Europe is expensive for them to operate in relation to aviation. And we have seen also and heard today about the cost of tickets in order to fly. It's also part of the reasons why there is a cost-effective drive. Second point is on the extension of the single European sky to the North African and Near East, from Lebanon all the way around to Morocco. They cannot be members of the EU, but they can be members of Eurocontrol, and Eurocontrol has been nominated by the Commission to extend the single sky. And we are working with the Ministry, with the Minister, in order to start the work, in order to prepare, so that when the presidency of the EU, when Malta takes up the presidency of the EU, we can be ready with a project, Eurocontrol and Malta, and also the other Mediterranean states. But being Maltese, I certainly have a preference for Malta to do this. But we can make this as an initiative and really extend the single sky, the single European sky, to include all these states at our interface to the south, in order to make air traffic management there more efficient, more effective, and then increase the revenue there. So I stop here with my final slide. You know, traffic is building up after an unprecedented stagnation. We're looking at delivering performance, safety, and flight efficiency, in punctuality, and in cost. There is opportunities for a competition on centralized services, and Malta is able to compete on this, both on the expertise that it has, and we've heard this afternoon about clouds. And the centralized services is about support services, is about exchanging data which is needed for air traffic management. You know, the opportunity is there, and there seems to be expertise there here. So there are opportunities there in relation to some of these services, and also the expansion of Europe, of ATM, the single sky, to neighboring states, to which Malta can take a leading role.